We got an upper body lift here today, so it's going to follow the same structure as the workout in the last video. We're going to start with the competition lift. So in this case today, working up to a 9 to a 9.5 RPE on the competition style bench press, and then dropping down to 335 for an AMRAP there. Then after that, going into the hypertrophy section of the workout, which is going to have a bunch of stuff, as you can see here. So we'll get into that as we get rolling into the video. But same idea here. We're going to try to use those short rest periods and the higher reps to use less load and try to get to a similar place in terms of mechanical tension and stress at the local level without having to use a ton of weight that's going to come with a bunch of other costs, essentially. All right, starting things off with bench here today. These are supposed to be 2 count pause benches, but as we can see here, yeah, it didn't really happen, which it never does. And that is a strategy that I use on myself and on my clients, is I will program in a 2 count pause knowing that I might get a 1 count pause, and that's good enough. So probably a legal pause, but would like that to be a little bit longer. And this was probably somewhere around a 9.5 and came up okay. I haven't been feeling awesome with bench, still a little bit tentative with the pec strain thing I had going into this, but it's been slowly getting better. And yeah, these down sets are definitely not 2 count pauses, but God, it feels like it at the moment, I swear. You'll see with these cable flies that I have the cable set pretty high. If you look at where it's lined up, the cable lined up around where the shoulder is, and there is a kind of a in and up trajectory. That's an excellent face. I should make that my profile picture. There's an in and up trajectory with the hand, and the reason I'm doing that is I'm trying to preferentially load the clavicular head, the upper portion of the pec, and in this kind of loading up and in, you're going to get a little bit more of your upper pec compared to the mid and lower portion. And just having the hands out in that position puts the upper pec into a really good position to be able to pull that arm towards the sternum. And that is something that's easy enough to set up. I mean, do I know that it's going to create this massive difference in a lifetime of training? No, I don't. But it's an easy enough thing to do. And I think it's good to just have a little bit of variability in these motions where maybe it turns out that we can't regionally hypertrophy things the way that we think that we can, although I do believe that there is some evidence to support that. But even if there wasn't, I think just working things from slightly different angles and having slightly different loading patterns can be useful for a lot of reasons. So we'll see that I'm just going to gradually get sweatier and less clothed here as the workout goes along. So hopefully everyone here is okay with that. You signed up for it. You didn't know that you signed up for it maybe, but you did. So just finishing out this 4th set, and on these, especially on this day, I'm going to allow some partial reps. I'm going to allow plenty of rest pausing, and I do want to just go back and just point out here that the range of motion is not what most of these be considered to be adequate, and I think that is okay, and I think that it is important to individualize some of this stuff. What I find is if I try to touch my arms behind my back and try to clasp them together, it hurts. It doesn't feel good. It doesn't hurt in a good way. It just feels like my shoulder is about to blow out. And there is some individuality here in terms of how much range of motion a person has at a joint. Maybe there are some standards that we should all be kind of working towards to some degree, but you have to feel that out for yourself. There isn't a absolute for that. So use your intuition, use your experience, and don't do things that feel like they're going to make your joints explode. And same deal going into these incline presses. There's somebody out there on the internet that can definitely use more range of motion and feel fantastic about it, but I find that if I try to push any more than this, usually things just start to not go well. Personally, what I've noticed with my own training is anytime that I really try to push that too far, I try to increase range of motion on a certain exercise. uh, Oftentimes, those are the things that lead to the biggest setbacks in a lot of ways for me. If I'm going to tweak something or do something that makes me have to alter my training, it's usually from trying to use more range of motion than I potentially have available. It's usually not for me trying to use too much loading. It's from me trying to do things quote unquote too optimally. And I find that to be the case with a lot of people that I either consult with or work with, where we just get a little excited about, for instance, this new stretching thing and how there, yeah, is plenty of evidence that if we load a tissue and put it under stretch, that there is going to be a pretty potent hypertrophy stimulus that comes along with that. But I think what we forget is that more stretch is not always better. Just getting the loading and the stretching may be enough in most cases. And so we don't necessarily know that past a certain point that getting more of that is going to be better. But what I have found out is that if I try to push more than what feels comfortable for me in a given motion, what I do find is that I just end up hurting myself in one way or another. Some shoulders here. I'm using this variation that I stole from Ben Giannis. I really like this one. It's a nice way to really match up the strength of the muscle in question, which is going to be mostly the medial delt, maybe some posterior delt, maybe a little bit of lower trap, along with the resistance of the exercise itself. So if we look at the top of the range of motion, you can see that that's where there's going to be the greatest moment arm. If we're looking at this 90-degree angle between the resistance and the joint in question, if we're just looking at the shoulder. And when we get down to the bottom of the range of motion, it's going to essentially have no moment arm, or much less of a moment arm at the bottom where the muscles are weaker. So at the top of the range of motion in this position where the delts are relatively more lengthened, they're a little bit stronger. And as we go into the shorter range of motion, they're a little bit weaker, and that matches very nicely with the resistance. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, I will make a video eventually just to explain moment arms and how they fit with training and how you can kind of make sense of certain exercises and the way that you may want to set them up. But for now, suffice to say that all of these things match pretty nicely in this exercise, and it is something you can generally just feel if you play around with this. You'll find that it feels pretty nice. That there's no point in the range of motion where all of a sudden you just feel really really weak or really really strong. It just feels kind of smooth throughout the whole thing. Also like that you get to lay down. It's kind of nice. But then the downside of that, of course, is just sweat all over the floor. See it towards the ends. Range of motion starts to shorten a little bit. We'll see that more on this next set as you start to really accumulate fatigue from the preceding sets. So there's a certain point where you kind of just have to cut it, and you're not really moving anymore, so you might as well just put the thing down. And throwing in during this block, especially I like having the option to use lots of partial reps, to use even some iso holds, or just trying to fight against that thing pulling you forward at whatever point in the range of motion you can stop. And this is just a fun time to go old school. This just feels like the real bodybuilding shit, from back in the day. So it is fun to get that going again. Yeah, throwing in a little drop set in here, which I also included in the incline. And just nothing beats this kind of training, honestly. It feels so nostalgic. This is back in the day. If you're old like me, every set was a drop set. Every set was usually arms. Every set was basically just either curls or bench press. But you always finished with a drop set, and it was always sweet. So it's fun to throw these in again every once in a while, just to have those in there is a good time. Next up, we've got I guess you can call these spider curls. Just a chest supported curl. Mostly doing this again because I don't want to have to support my own body weight. I'm already getting very sweaty and tired. So if I don't have to support my own weight on my own feet. That's definitely a bonus. And yeah, this one just pretty straightforward. At the top of the range of motion, it's going to be the most challenging, so we can call this more of a short and bias type of exercise. And we'll pair that up with a more length and bias one after this. And what you may have noticed is that I haven't trained any pulling exercises yet. I haven't done any back work yet. And the reason for that is because my arms are very small, and especially relative to my back, it's something that I need to bring up. So I do in certain phases like these, especially where the workouts are very long and there's a lot of volume. I actually want to hit the arm work before doing the back work. For one, arms don't really take as much systemically away as the back work does, so I'm not accumulating quite as much fatigue from this. But I just again want to focus more on the weaker body parts, and that for me is definitely biceps and triceps. So just knocking those out before I go into the lat work for the day, which is pretty minimal. Just because, again, it's just a body part that I don't need to work on as much. I mean, I'm a fan of bodybuilding. I'm a fan of the freak shows. So I think you have a body part that sticks out, you might as well just make it even more ridiculous looking. So I do still like to train lats. But if there is one thing on my body that I probably don't need to focus on a ton, it's that I roll out of bed with a lat pump, and I can get a pretty good lat stimulus by drinking orange juice. So don't really need to go crazy with that. Then going into, again, an exercise that's a little bit more biased in the lengthened position, or at least that we're getting more of a stretch in a lengthened position. So as the arms go behind the back, at least for that long head of the bicep, getting a little bit more of a stretch there. And again, not a whole lot different probably in the long run, but I do think it is a good idea to just vary up that stimulus a little bit, get some different loading vectors going, and at the very least, psychologically, it's helpful just to have some different stuff to work on. I was having a little bit more trouble stabilizing my upper body, and in particular my humerus, with these than I would like. So I have been playing around with a seatbelt on these, just strapping the seatbelt around the arms, like I'm showing in the video up here somewhere. I'll throw one in here. And I found that to be pretty helpful. It just allows you to really just focus on the biceps and not have to think about a whole lot else, because I was definitely getting a little bit more motion than I would like. So might be something to play around with. You definitely could make the argument that you don't want to be doing that with every single exercise, because there might be a certain point where you're actually limiting yourself and not allowing you to build some of that tolerance and being able to stabilize your body in different body segments. But I think for certain things, it can be really useful. And again, for me, this being a weak body part, I'm going to try to use whatever I can to make sure that I'm loading the tissues that I want to load. I think that is really important and an easy, again, enough thing to do that doesn't really cost a whole lot. All right, so we got some crossover tricep extensions up next here. So this is a nice one. It makes it very easy to just, again, line up the resistance with the joints in motion. So the elbow, the upper arm, everything kind of lined up pretty nicely here, very easily with this setup. If you don't have a functional trainer that has the ability to move in and out with the arms, you probably just use a single arm version of this, and just, again, try to line up that cable with the same path as that upper arm, trying to keep the cable parallel with the upper arm as much as possible. And just from there, it's a pretty smooth tricep extension. So not a whole lot with these, pretty straight up. Again, we're going to use some partial reps here as we start to fatigue. We'll do a little bit of a drop set at the end, and simple is good. Same idea with the upper arm and the shoulder. Try not to get a whole lot of movement through there. As you fatigue, there's going to be some amount of that, but just doing the best you can to at least set yourself up to make that easy. So I'm as close to being right underneath the cables as possible, so I'm not dealing with that extra force of being pulled forward. Even though the weights aren't super heavy with this inherently, that can still be a factor that you don't necessarily want to deal with if you're really just focused on working a group of muscles. So if I step back here, I would be getting pulled forward more. So just being straight underneath, as far underneath the cables as possible is pretty helpful for that. And then going into something where, again, getting a little bit more stretch through some portions of the tricep here. And again, different loading vectors, different positions. I think it's a useful thing to work with. You can see I've got the elbows pointed out, so they're going in line with the resistance, which is really this rope and the way that the rope wants to pull me in. If I tried to point the elbows forward, I would not be able to get to a point where I can actually keep those things parallel. So just going out with the arms and then letting the rope pull me in, that lines things up pretty nicely, so I'm not creating any extra forces on the elbow that I don't necessarily want. And again, getting as close to the cable as possible, backing up that bench all the way towards the cable. And you could certainly do these standing, but I just find that to be a lot more difficult because I don't like to stand up if I don't have to. This just makes it really easy to lock in and then just focus on what we're trying to do at the elbow. Just crank them out. So again, at the end of this set, we're going to get some partial reps, usually a few partials left at the end of the set. If you got a ton of partials at the end of the set on these, you probably didn't really push that far on the full range of motion ones. I do find that to be the case. Some people, they seem like they have 15 extra partial reps. So I really question whether or not they actually pushed the set to begin with. But hey, that's what you do with your partials is up to you. All right, awkward angle here. We still got a drop set to do. This is the hardest part right here. It's just getting these stupid things into place. And yeah, if you don't have a training partner or any friends, this can be a challenging one. But I've managed to do pretty well without either one of those things for most of my life. Moving into high rows up next. So here we finally have the back work in after about 90 minutes into the workout. So I'm using a chest support here for hopefully obvious reasons. Doing these just straight up bent over, I think for bodybuilding purposes is not the greatest exercise. Maybe you can make an argument for other goals that doing some type of straight up bent over row without any type of chest support is great. But for bodybuilding purposes, if we're really trying to just train the muscles in question, which is mostly going to be the rhomboids, mid traps, maybe a little bit of posterior delt, I think just being able to stabilize yourself against something is really useful. Be able to use that chest pad as an anchor. And honestly, like these a lot. Like this is not the same as having a really nice chest supported machine, but I think these can work pretty well if you're in the gym and this is all you have available. Even if you have these giant circus dumbbells like I have, which sometimes are really annoying to do this on. But I actually do like them in teaching people this exercise because it forces them to think more out with the elbows as opposed to back. If we were thinking more lats, we'd probably have those elbows tucked in a little bit closer and be thinking about driving the elbow towards that front pocket, more down towards the hip. On these ones, the intention is more pulling those hands and elbows apart, away from one another, and really just trying to pull with that mid back, upper back. So just that little bit of a change there in intention can make a pretty big difference in what muscles we're recruiting. And the angle of the bench can be something that you can play around with as well. If you're looking for like a little bit more upper trap with these, you might want to go at a higher angle. I'm thinking more mid traps and rhomboids, and then I'm essentially doing the same thing here with this one. And this is just going to change a little bit of where it's difficult in the range of motion, but it's really not a whole lot different. And the reason for that is really just individual to me. If my back needs work, it's more on the upper back and a mid back area. It's not so much with the lats. So I'm kind of hitting the same thing twice essentially with the way that I have this set up on this day. Could have just kept going with the chest supported ones with the dumbbells if I wanted to, but it's probably enough of a difference with these to make it somewhat worthwhile to have the two different variations. Not something I would suggest for most people unless they had a hyper specific reason to do it like I do. I'm thinking a little bit more up and back with these ones as opposed to the dumbbell row where I was just thinking more out and back. So probably getting a little bit more upper trap with this one, especially considering where the cables are pulling me. But again, potentially a little bit redundant having these two exercises on the same day. But if you're trying to specialize on something, I think it makes sense to make sure that you hit that from all angles. Last thing here, the straight arm cable pull down. Probably a good one for getting some teres major, which is that muscle right on top of the lat there, and maybe getting a little bit of lat. Honestly, I just like the way this one feels, especially at the end of a long workout like this. I do think just getting that motion through the scaps just is healthy. It feels good, and just something that I'd like to include every now and then. And this is a good place to throw it in. So I don't think of this as being a massive lat builder in any way, but once you're already fatigued through these areas, I think it can be a nice way just putting some extra pennies in the bank and just getting a little bit of extra stimulus. So nothing crazy here, just trying to keep the arms long and straight, and just doing the best I can not to move my body around too much. There's other ways to set this up where you can kind of lock yourself in and not have to worry so much about stabilizing the body. But again, already fatigued by the time I get here, so not moving massive weights on this one, and not so much to have to really worry about all of that. So just finishing off with a few sets of these, I think just 3 sets total. And that is it for the day. So a pretty long upper body lift. I think this one took almost 2 hours, but it's a fun one. A lot of volume. Goes by really quick though, having those short rest periods. And again, anytime you can throw in some drop sets and some partials and get a nice pump, it's a fun day. All right, so I got one more upper body workout recorded in here for this phase, and then we're going to move into the powerlifting phase. I'll also recap how the powerlifting meet went after that. So stay tuned for that. Thank you again for watching. If you have any questions, comments, leave them below. I'll get back to you as soon as I remember to check my social media, and I'll talk to you guys next time.